The world didn't end with a whimper, it ended with the sound of glass shattering. Or at least, that's what it felt like. A deafening crack of thunder shook the floorboards beneath Amara's feet so violently that the ceramic mug on the kitchen island danced to the edge and toppled over. It smashed against the hardwood, sending a spray of cooling hibiscus tea across the pristine floor. "Damn it," Amara hissed, jumping back as the red liquid pooled like blood near her bare toes. Before she could even reach for a towel, the cabin groaned under the assault of the wind. Another flash of lightning bleached the world white, illuminating the aggressive, driving rain that hammered against the floor-to-ceiling windows. It was a typhoon, or something close to it, battering the side of the mountain with a fury that felt personal. Then, the hum of the refrigerator died. The soft, ambient glow of the recessed lighting flickered once, twice, and vanished. Absolute, suffocating darkness swallowed the room. Amara stood frozen, her heart hammering against her ribs, sinking with the thunder. The silence inside the cabin was sudden and heavy, broken only by the roar of the storm outside. The modern, glass-fronted retreat she had rented to find herself suddenly felt less like a sanctuary and more like a cage suspended at the edge of the world. She fumbled for her phone in the pocket of her oversized cardigan, using the screen's pale light to navigate toward the utility drawer. "Just a fuse," she whispered to herself, her voice sounding small in the cavernous living space. "Just the grid going down. It happens." But as she struck a match to light the emergency candle, her hands were trembling. It wasn't the storm that scared her. She was a grown woman, she could handle a power outage. It was the silence that came with it. That heavy, oppressive silence that reminded her exactly why she had run away from Seoul 3 weeks ago. It was the silence of being alone when you were used to the noise of being loved. Before we dive deeper into the storm, if you enjoy stories about intense passion, second chances, and love that defies the odds, please take a second to hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell. It helps me create more stories like this for you. Now, back to the cabin. Amara moved to the window, the candle flame dancing wildly in the draft. She pressed her hand against the cold glass. Somewhere out there, miles down the winding mountain road, was civilization. Seoul was a 4-hour drive away. Minho is 4 hours away, her mind supplied unhelpfully. She squeezed her eyes shut, pushing the thought away. She wasn't allowed to think about him. That was the rule. 2 months. 60 days of separation to figure out if their worlds could actually fit together, or if the pressure of his family's conglomerate and her need for artistic freedom were simply incompatible. She had left him standing in the foyer of his penthouse, his face a mask of stone, his eyes burning with a devastation he refused to voice. "If you walk out that door, Amara," he had said, his voice terrifyingly calm, "don't expect me to come looking for you." She had walked out. And for 21 days, he hadn't come. A sudden, rhythmic thudding sound broke through the noise of the rain. Amara froze. She turned her head, straining to hear. It sounded like something heavy hitting the solid oak of the front door. A branch? Debris from the storm? Thud. 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 No. That was rhythmic. That was a fist. Panic flared in her chest, hot and sharp. This cabin was isolated. The private drive was steep and treacherous even in good weather. In this storm, it should have been impassable. She grabbed the heavy iron poker from the fireplace, her knuckles turning ash gray against her brown skin. She moved toward the door, her breath hitching. "Who is it?" she called out, trying to make her voice sound authoritative, though it wavered. No answer. Just the wind howling like a banshee and that heavy, desperate pounding again. She reached the door, unlatched the deadbolt, and cracked it open just an inch, keeping the chain engaged. The wind slammed against the wood, ripping the door from her grip and slamming it against the chain. Rain sprayed into the hallway instantly, soaking her face and the front of her cardigan. Through the crack, illuminated only by a flash of lightning, she saw a figure. Tall. Broad-shouldered. drenched in black. Amara. The voice was ragged, torn from a throat raw with shouting, but she would know that baritone anywhere. It vibrated through her bones, deeper than the thunder. "Minho," she gasped, dropping the fire poker. It clattered loudly on the floor. She fumbled with the chain, her fingers slippery with rain and shock, finally undoing it and throwing the door wide open. He stood there on the porch, swaying slightly. He looked like a man who had walked out of a shipwreck. His expensive black trench coat was heavy with water, unbuttoned and flapping in the gale. Underneath, his crisp white dress shirt was plastered to his chest, translucent and ruined. His dark hair, usually styled to perfection, was matted to his forehead, dripping water into eyes that looked wild, frantic. "Minho, my God!" Amara shouted over the wind. She reached out, grabbing the lapel of his coat and yanking him over the threshold. He stumbled in, bringing the storm with him. Amara slammed the door shut, leaning her back against it to engage the lock, cutting off the roar of the wind. The sudden quiet of the hallway was jarring. All she could hear was his harsh, ragged breathing and the steady drip, drip, drip of water pooling around his Italian leather shoes. "What are you doing here?" Amara demanded, though her voice lacked any real bite. She was too busy scanning him for injuries. "The storm warning, it's a red alert. The roads are washed out." Minho didn't answer immediately. He just looked at her. His chest heaved as he fought to catch his breath. He looked at her as if he wasn't sure she was real, as if she were a hallucination born of hypothermia. He took a step toward her. He was shivering violently, his teeth practically chattering, but the intensity in his gaze scorched her. "The power," he rasped, his English accented and thick with exhaustion. "I was monitoring the grid status of the villa. It went dark." Amara stared at him, her mouth falling open slightly. "You drove through a typhoon, because my lights went out." "I called," he said, taking another step. He loomed over her now, dripping wet, smelling of rain, ozone, and the faint, familiar scent of sandalwood. "You didn't answer." The landline was down. The cell towers were unresponsive. "So you drove here?" "I couldn't." He cut himself off, closing his eyes for a second as a violent shiver racked his tall frame. When he opened them again, the raw vulnerability there stole the breath from her lungs. "I couldn't leave you in the dark, Amara. Not again." The words hit her harder than the wind outside. She reached out instinctively, her hands landing on his forearms. Through the soaked fabric of his sleeves, he was freezing. Like ice. "You're hypothermic," she said, her healer instincts overriding the shock. "Your hands, Jesus, Minho, you're freezing." She grabbed his icy hands in hers. The contrast was startling, her warm, gold-undertoned skin against his pale, blue-tinged fingers. He flinched at the contact, a sharp intake of breath hissing through his teeth, but he didn't pull away. Instead, his fingers convulsed around hers, gripping tight, painful and desperate. "I'm fine," he lied, though his voice shook. "You are not fine. You're shaking apart," Amara snapped, tugging him toward the living room where the fireplace was. "Get inside. We need to get these wet clothes off you before you go into shock." She tried to pull him, but he was immovable, like a statue rooted to the floor. He resisted her pull, holding her in place. "Minho, move," she urged, looking up at him. He ignored the command. He released one of her hands only to bring it up to his face. His freezing palm cupped her cheek, his thumb brushing over her skin with a reverence that made her knees weak. A drop of rainwater from his hair landed on her nose, cold and startling. "You're safe," he whispered, as if confirming it for himself. "I'm safe," she softened, her anger melting into concern. She covered his hand on her cheek with her own, trying to warm him. "But you won't be if we don't warm you up. Please. Come to the fire." He nodded slowly, the adrenaline finally crashing, leaving him exhausted. He let her lead him into the main room. Amara went into crisis mode. She pushed him toward the large leather armchair near the hearth, but he refused to sit, standing stubbornly in front of the unlit fireplace while she grabbed the matches. "Sit down, Minho. I don't want to ruin the furniture," he muttered, looking down at his sodden clothes. "I don't care about the rental deposit." Amara yelled, striking a match and tossing it onto the kindling she had prepared earlier. The dry wood caught instantly, flames licking up the logs, casting a warm, orange glow that battled back the shadows. She turned back to him. The firelight flickered across his face, highlighting the sharp angles of his cheekbones and the exhaustion etched under his eyes. He looked devastated. Beautiful, but wrecked. "Take it off," Amara ordered, her voice trembling slightly. Minho looked at her, his dark eyes hooded. "What?" "The coat. The jacket. The shirt," she listed, pointing at him. "Everything wet has to go. Now." He fumbled with the belt of his trench coat, but his fingers were clumsy, numb from the cold and the grip he had kept on the steering wheel for hours. He tried to push a button through a hole, missed, and swore softly in Korean. "Aish." Amara watched him struggle for 3 seconds before she couldn't take it anymore. "Stop," she said, stepping into his personal space. "Let me do it." She brushed his hands away. He froze, his arms dropping to his sides, surrendering to her. Amara stood directly in front of him. She could feel the cold radiating off him, battling with the heat of the growing fire. She reached for the belt of his coat, undoing the knot efficiently. She pushed the heavy, soaked wool off his shoulders. It hit the floor with a wet thwack. Next was his suit jacket. She peeled it down his arms. He had to lean down slightly to let her pull it off, his face passing inches from hers. His breath hitched, a jagged sound in the quiet room. Now, it was just the shirt. The expensive white cotton was ruined, rendered almost transparent by the rain. It clung to him like a second skin, outlining the definition of his chest, the hard ridges of his abdominals, and the dark ink of the dragon tattoo that curled over his left pectoral, a secret he kept hidden from the boardroom, reserved only for her. Amara's mouth went dry. Even freezing, shivering, and exhausted, the man was a masterpiece. And he was here. For her. She reached for the top button of his collar. Her knuckles grazed the hollow of his throat, and she felt his pulse jumping, erratic and fast. "Amara," he warned, his voice a low rumble that vibrated through her fingertips. "Quiet," she whispered, her eyes focused on the button. "I'm just taking care of you." "Are you?" he asked, his gaze dropping to watch her fingers work. "Because it feels like you're torturing me." Amara's fingers faltered on the second button. The word torture hung in the air between them, heavier than the humidity, sharper than the cold. She looked up, locking eyes with him. In the flickering firelight, Minho's irises were blown wide, swallowing the dark brown, leaving only black pools of exhaustion and raw, unfiltered want. He wasn't looking at her face, he was watching her hands on his chest, his jaw clenched tight enough to snap. "It's not torture, Minho," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the crackle of the dry logs catching fire behind him. "It's survival." "You're shivering." "I'm not shivering because of the cold, Amara." The confession was quiet, stripped of his usual corporate armor. It sent a jolt straight to her stomach, heating her blood instantly. She swallowed hard, forcing herself to focus on the task. Button 3. Button 4. With each slip of the pearlescent plastic through the wet fabric, more of him was revealed. The expanse of his chest was pale from the winter chill, but flushed pink where the heat of the fire, and her knuckles, grazed him. She peeled the soaked cotton away from his shoulders. It made a wet, heavy sound as it peeled off his skin. He hissed through his teeth, a sharp intake of air, as the cool air hit his damp torso before the fire's warmth could kiss it. "Arms," she commanded softly. He obeyed, letting the shirt slide down his wrists, discarding it onto the pile of wet wool on the floor. Now, he stood before her, stripped to the waist. Amara's breath hitched. She had seen him like this 100 times, in the morning light of his penthouse, in the dim glow of hotel rooms in Tokyo and Paris. But here, in the primitive, dancing light of the fire, he looked different. Raw. Dangerous. The dragon tattoo that curled over his left pectoral and shoulder seemed to writhe in the flickering light. The black ink was stark against his skin. It was a symbol of his family's legacy, the burden he carried as the heir, but right now, all she wanted to do was trace the lines of it. To suit the weight of the world he carried on those broad shoulders. She realized she was staring. She realized her hands were still resting on his bare chest, her palms absorbing the tremors that racked his body. "Sit," she said, her voice rough. She pushed him gently backward toward the leather armchair. This time, he didn't argue. He collapsed into the chair, his long legs sprawling out, his wet trousers sticking to his skin. He leaned his head back against the leather, closing his eyes, his chest heaving as he tried to regulate his temperature. "I'll get blankets," Amara said, turning to flee the intensity of the room. "Don't go far," he murmured, his eyes still closed. "Just to the linen closet." 2 seconds. She rushed to the hallway, grabbing 2 thick wool throw blankets and a fluffy white towel. Her heart was racing a mile a minute. He came. The thought kept looping in her mind. He actually came. When she returned, he hadn't moved. He looked like a fallen angel, abandoned by grace, shivering in her armchair. She didn't hand him the towel. Instead, she draped one blanket over his legs to cover the wet trousers, and then she moved behind the chair. She dropped the towel over his head, gently rubbing his hair to soak up the freezing rain. Minho groaned low in his throat, a sound of pure relief that vibrated through the back of the chair and into her hips as she stood behind him. "Better?" she asked, her fingers massaging his scalp through the terry cloth. "You have no idea," he rasped. She worked methodically, drying the dark strands, then moved the towel down to dry his neck and shoulders. She was careful, tender, treating him like something precious that had been broken. "Why, Minho?" she asked, her hands pausing on his shoulders. She could feel the tension in his trapezius muscles, hard as rock. "We had a deal. No contact. 60 days to figure out if we actually fit into each other's lives." He reached up, his hand catching her wrist, stopping her movement. He didn't turn around, he just held her there, his grip strong, grounding. "The deal was flawed," he said, staring into the fire. "It assumed that I could function without you. It assumed that my life before you was something I could just go back to." "You have a duty," Amara reminded him, repeating the words his father had thrown at her over a polite, poisonous dinner 3 months ago. "To the company. To the board. To a wife who understands that world." "Fuck the board," Minho said. The curse was sharp, violent. Amara froze. Minho never cursed. He was the picture of control. The perfect son. He pulled on her wrist, guiding her around the chair until she was standing between his spread legs, facing him. The blanket had slipped slightly, revealing the V-lines of his hips disappearing into the damp waistband of his trousers. He looked up at her, his eyes clear now, burning with a fierce, terrifying resolve. "I stood in that boardroom this morning," he said, his voice gaining strength. "My father was talking about the merger. About the future. And all I could hear was the silence in my apartment. All I could see was the ghost of you sitting at my kitchen island, sketching." He leaned forward, his hands moving to rest on her hips. His thumbs rubbed small, soothing circles into the fabric of her leggings, but the heat of his touch seared through to her skin. "I realized something, Amara. I don't want the legacy if it means coming home to an empty house. I don't want the wife who understands that world. I want the woman who challenges it. I want the woman who throws paint on canvases and laughs with her whole body and makes me feel like I'm a human being, not just a stock ticker." Amara felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes. This was everything she had wanted to hear for 2 years. But fear was a stubborn thing. "You say that now," she whispered, her hands finding their way to his hair, pushing the damp strands back from his forehead. "But you're wet, and you're tired, and the adrenaline is talking. When the sun comes up, when the storm clears." "The storm isn't out there," he interrupted, pressing his face against her stomach, wrapping his arms around her waist, burying himself in her warmth. "The storm is in here. It's been raging since you left." He inhaled deeply, breathing her in. Lavender. And paint thinner. And rain. He shuddered against her. "God, I missed you. Bogo Shiposo, Amara." It physically hurt. The use of Korean broke her. The barrier she had built around her heart, the one made of logic and self-preservation, cracked wide open. She couldn't fight him. Not when he was like this. Not when he was on his knees, metaphorically, at her feet. She carted her fingers through his damp hair, scratching lightly at his scalp, feeling him melt against her. "I missed you too," she admitted, her voice trembling. "I tried to draw the mountains, but every time I put charcoal to paper, I ended up drawing your eyes." He pulled back just enough to look up at her. His face was open, vulnerable, stripped of all pretense. "Then why did you leave?" "Because I was disappearing, Minho," she said honestly. "In your world, I was just Minho's girlfriend. I was losing my colors. I came here to find them again." "And did you?" he asked. "Did you find them?" Amara looked down at him. At the firelight reflecting in his obsidian eyes. At the flush on his cheeks. At the way his hands clung to her hips as if she were the only solid thing in a spinning universe. "I found some," she said softly. She traced the line of his jaw with her thumb. "But I realized that colors don't look as bright when there's no one to show them to." Minho turned his face into her palm, kissing the center of her hand. His lips were warm now. The hypothermia was receding, replaced by a different kind of fever. "Let me see them," he murmured against her skin. "Show me everything. Scream at me. Paint on me. I don't care. Just don't leave me in the gray again." Author's note: if you're feeling the tension in this room right now, let me know in the comments. Are you team, kiss him already, or team, make him work for it? I read every single comment, so tell me what you would do in Amara's shoes. Minho shifted in the chair, his grip on her hips tightening. He pulled her a fraction of an inch closer. Now, her thighs were pressed against the inside of his knees. The heat radiating off him was intoxicating. "Amara," he said, his voice dropping an octave, becoming rougher. "I am going to ask you to do something, and if you say no, I will respect it. But I need you to know that my control is hanging by a thread." "What?" she breathed, her heart hammering against her ribs so hard she was sure he could feel it. "My trousers," he said, his eyes darkening, dropping to look at where her legs met his. "They are wet. They are cold. And being this close to you, while wearing them, is becoming a problem." Amara's breath hitched. She looked down. The fine wool of his suit pants was indeed soaked, clinging uncomfortably to his legs. But the implication of his words hung heavy in the air. Taking off his shirt was medical. Taking off his trousers, that was intimate. That was crossing the line from nurse to lover. "You'll catch a cold if you keep them on," she said, her voice sounding far steadier than she felt. "That is the logical reason," Minho agreed, a small, dangerous smirk playing on his lips, the first smile she had seen since he arrived. "But it is not the only reason." He waited. He was giving her the power. He was letting her choose the pace, even though every line of his body screamed with impatience. Amara stepped back, just half a step. Minho's face fell for a microsecond, thinking rejection was coming. "Stand up," she commanded softly. He stood. He towered over her again, the blanket falling from his lap to the floor. He stood there, half-naked, beautiful, and waiting. Amara reached for his belt buckle. The metal was cold against her fingertips, but the skin beneath it was burning. The metallic click of the buckle undoing echoed in the room, louder than the thunder rolling over the mountains. Amara's breath hitched in her throat. She kept her eyes trained on her task, refusing to look up at his face, afraid that if she saw the heat in his eyes, her hands would shake too much to finish this. She loosened the leather strap, the material sliding through the loops with a soft rasp that sounded indecent in the heavy silence. Her knuckles grazed the waistband of his trousers, and she felt the muscles of his abdomen contract sharply beneath the fabric. He wasn't just standing there, he was holding himself still by sheer force of will. "Zipper," he whispered, the word a command and a plea rolled into one. Amara reached for the tab. She pulled it down slowly. The sound of the metal teeth parting seemed to stretch on for an eternity, a slow-motion unraveling of the last barrier between his professional armor and his raw, physical reality. Minho placed a hand on her shoulder to steady himself as he stepped out of the sodden trousers one leg at a time. He kicked the wet heap of wool away with a disdainful flick of his foot, sending it to join the pile of ruined clothes in the corner. Now, he stood before her in nothing but a pair of black boxer briefs that clung to him like a second skin. Amara took an involuntary step back, her eyes traveling up the length of him. If he had looked good in a suit, he looked devastating out of it. His legs were powerful, corded with muscle from years of soccer and disciplined gym sessions that he squeezed in before the sun rose. The firelight danced over his skin, highlighting the golden undertones and the faint sheen of moisture that still clung to him. He was a sculpture of long lines and hard planes, breathing heavily, alive and burning in her living room. "Amara," he said, his voice low. "Stop looking at me like I'm a ghost." "I'm not," she breathed, her gaze finally snapping up to his face. "I'm looking at you like you're trouble." A corner of his mouth ticked up, that dangerous, confident smirk that had made her fall for him in the first place. "I thought you liked trouble. Isn't that why you approached me at the gala?" "Because I looked too bored to be safe." "I was naive," she countered, though her pulse was throbbing at the base of her throat. "I didn't know the trouble came with a board of directors and a typhoon." Minho laughed, a low, rumbling sound that seemed to vibrate through the floorboards and straight up into her legs. He reached out, his hand, warmer now, thank God, wrapping around her waist. He pulled her flush against him. The shock of his nearly naked body against her clothed one was electric. The dampness of his skin soaked through her thin leggings, cool at first, but quickly heating up where they touched. "Come here," he murmured, guiding her backward until her calves hit the plush rug in front of the fireplace. "I'm warming up, but I'm still cold deep down. Help me." He sat down on the rug, pulling her down with him. They settled in front of the roaring fire, the world outside reduced to nothing but the sound of rain lashing against the glass. They sat cross-legged, knees touching. The intimacy shifted. It wasn't the frantic energy of the arrival anymore, it was something heavier. Slower. Minho reached out and took her hand again, playing with her fingers. He traced the lines of her palm, his touch feather-light, agonizingly slow. "You have paint on your cuticle," he noted softly, rubbing a smudge of dried indigo ink on her thumb. "I was working," she said, watching his head bent over her hand. His hair was drying in messy waves now, falling over his forehead, making him look younger, less severe. Before the lights went out. "Show me," he said, lifting his head. "Show you what?" "The art. The colors you found." Amara hesitated. Her sketchbook was on the windowsill. It felt private. But looking at him, bare-chested, vulnerable, sitting on her floor, she realized he had stripped himself bare for her. The least she could do was share her soul. She reached over to the coffee table where she had tossed the book earlier. She handed it to him. Minho opened it with reverence. He flipped through the pages slowly. There were sketches of the mountains, charcoal rubbings of bark, watercolors of the morning mist. And then, the portraits. Page after page of him. Minho sleeping. Minho drinking coffee, looking out the window of his penthouse. Minho frowning at his phone. Minho laughing, a rare capture. He stopped on a sketch of his own hand, holding a pen. It was detailed, loving. Every vein, every tendon captured with obsessive care. He looked up at her, his eyes shining with an emotion so intense it looked like pain. "You took me with you," he whispered. "Even when you left. I couldn't leave you behind," Amara admitted, her voice cracking. "I tried. God, Minho, I tried to pack light. But you take up so much space in my head." He closed the book and set it aside, far away from the fire. Then he moved. In one fluid motion, he shifted from sitting cross-legged to kneeling in front of her. He loomed over her, blocking out the rest of the room. The firelight created a halo around his silhouette, casting his face in shadow, making his eyes gleam like obsidian. "Then let me take up space here, too," he said, his voice dropping to a gravelly whisper that shivered down her spine. "In this cabin. In this moment." He reached out, his hands grasping the hem of her oversized knitted sweater. "You are overdressed," he murmured. "It's unfair." "Unfair?" Amara challenged weakly, her hands coming up to rest on his bare biceps. His skin was hot now. Fever hot. "I am sitting here with nothing to hide," he said, tugging gently on the sweater. "And you are wrapped in wool like a fortress. Let me in, Amara." She didn't fight him. She couldn't. Her body had been craving this, craving him, for weeks. The skin hunger she had felt earlier was roaring now, a physical ache in her chest. She lifted her arms. Minho pulled the sweater up, moving slowly. As the heavy knit fabric slid over her stomach, the cool air of the room hit her skin, immediately followed by the searing heat of the fire. He pulled it over her head, tossing it aside. She was left in a simple silk camisole and her leggings. The silk was a soft champagne color against her dark skin, shimmering in the firelight. Minho's intake of breath was sharp. He sat back on his heels, just looking at her. His gaze felt like a physical touch, tracing the slope of her neck, the curve of her collarbone, the swell of her breasts beneath the thin fabric. "Beautiful," he breathed in Korean. "Niamu Ariamde." The words were a caress. He leaned forward, but he didn't kiss her lips. Instead, he buried his face in the crook of her neck. Amara gasped, her head falling back instinctively. His stubble grazed her sensitive skin, a delicious, scratchy friction that sent goosebumps racing down her arms. He inhaled deeply, breathing in her scent, and then he pressed a hot, open-mouthed kiss to the pulse point just below her ear. "Minho," she sighed, her hands tangling in his hair, gripping the thick strands. "I'm here," he rumbled against her skin, the vibration of his voice traveling straight to her core. "I'm right here." He moved lower, his lips trailing fire down the line of her throat. He bit gently at the tendon, soothing the sting with his tongue immediately after. It was possessive. It was claiming. Amara's hand slid down from his hair to his shoulders, her nails digging into the hard muscle. "We need to talk," she whispered, though it was the last thing she wanted to do. "About the future." "About." "Not now," he growled, cutting her off. He pulled back, his hands gripping her upper arms, his thumbs pressing into her skin. "Right now, there is no future. There is no company. There is no soul. There is just the storm. And us." He looked at her with a fierce intensity. "Give me tonight, Amara. No questions. No doubts. Just, give me this." "Okay, pause. I need to know, have you ever had a connection so strong that the rest of the world just disappeared? That us against the world feeling? If you have, drop a fire in the comments. And if you're enjoying the chemistry between Amara and Minho, don't forget to like the video, it tells YouTube to share this love story with more people. Amara looked into his eyes and saw the desperation there. He wasn't asking for sex, he was asking for a lifeline. He was asking to be anchored. Okay, she whispered. Tonight. Minho nodded, accepting the truce. He moved his hands from her arms to her waist, his thumbs slipping under the hem of the silk camisole. His skin against hers was electric, a circuit finally completing. Lie back, he told her. She lowered herself onto the plush rug. The wool was soft against her back. The fire was warm on her side. But the man hovering over her, he was the sun. He braced himself on his forearms on either side of her head, caging her in. He looked down at her, his dark hair falling forward like a curtain, shielding them from the rest of the room. You have no idea, he murmured, his gaze dropping to her lips, how many times I have dreamed of this. Of you. Looking up at me. Tell me, she challenged softly, reaching up to trace the outline of his lower lip. He turned his head, kissing her finger, biting the pad of it gently. Every night, he confessed. I would wake up reaching for you. And when my hand hit the cold sheet, I wanted to burn the city down. The violence of the sentiment shocked her, but it thrilled her too. Minho, the stoic prince of industry, wanting to burn his kingdom for her. I'm here now, she soothed, pulling his head down. You don't have to reach anymore. He didn't wait. He crashed his mouth onto hers. It wasn't a polite kiss. It wasn't the tentative, apologetic kiss of a man asking for forgiveness. It was the kiss of a man who had been starving for 21 days. It was deep, wet, and all-consuming. His tongue swept into her mouth, tasting her, claiming her. Amara moaned into the kiss, her body arching up off the rug to meet him. She wrapped her legs around his waist, pulling him down, needing the weight of him to ground her. The sensation of his bare chest pressing against her silk-covered breasts was maddening. It wasn't enough skin. She needed more. She tugged at the camisole, bunching the fabric up. Minho understood immediately. He broke the kiss, gasping for air, his forehead resting against hers. Off? He asked, his voice a wrecked growl. Off, she demanded. I want to feel you. All of you. Minho sat back on his heels again, pulling her up with him. He grabbed the hem of the camisole. Lift your arms. She obeyed. He pulled the silk up and over her head, the static making her hair cling to her cheeks. He tossed the shirt away blindly. It landed somewhere near the kitchen, forgotten. Now, she was bare to the waist. The firelight bathed her skin in gold. Minho didn't touch her immediately. He just stared, his chest heaving. His eyes traced the curve of her breasts, the dark nipples hardening in the cool air, the soft slope of her stomach. God, he choked out, shaking his head as if in disbelief. Perfection. He reached out, but his hands were trembling. He hesitated, hovering just inches from her skin. Touch me, Minho, Amara pleaded, her patience snapping. Stop looking and touch me. I'm afraid, he whispered, looking her dead in the eye. Afraid of what? That if I start, he said, his voice raw, I won't be able to stop. That I will devour you. Amara smiled, a slow, wicked curve of her lips. She reached out, grabbing his wrists and pulling his hands onto her breasts. Then devour me. The permission hung in the air, smoky and sweet. Devour me. Minho didn't need to be told twice. The last thread of his restraint, that ironclad discipline that ran his company, his family, and his life, snapped with an audible groan. He pushed her back onto the thick fur rug. It wasn't gentle. It was urgent, a reclamation of territory he had lost. Amara gasped as her bare back hit the soft wool, the sensation of the fibers tickling her skin immediately overwhelmed by the crushing, glorious weight of him settling between her legs. You have no idea, he growled, his voice vibrating against her sternum as he pressed a searing, open-mouthed kiss to the center of her chest, right over her thundering heart. "How long I have waited to hear you say that." He didn't stay at her lips. He began a slow, agonizing descent. His mouth moved over her skin like a brand. He kissed the slope of her breast, his tongue swirling over the hardened nipple until she arched off the floor with a sharp cry. He kissed the underside of her ribcage, his stubble grazing her sensitive skin, sending friction burns of pleasure radiating through her nerves. "Min-ho," she panted, her hands scrabbling for purchase, finding his shoulders, his biceps, his hair. She needed to hold on to something. The world was tilting. He ignored her plea, or perhaps he interpreted it as encouragement. He moved lower. He kissed the soft dip of her navel, his hands gripping her waist, his thumbs digging into her hip bones as if to anchor her to the earth. "Beautiful," he murmured against her stomach, the hot dampness of his breath making her muscles contract. "Every inch. Mine." He sat back for a split second, his eyes wild and dark, hair falling into his face. He reached for the waistband of her leggings, the final barrier. "Lift your hips," he commanded. Amara obeyed instantly. She was fluid, malleable in his hands. He peeled the fabric down, sliding it over her hips, down her thighs, off her calves. He tossed them aside with the rest of their discarded armor. Now, she was completely bare before him. The firelight licked over her body, casting long shadows and golden highlights. She felt exposed, vulnerable in a way that terrified her, but then Min-ho looked at her. He wasn't looking at her like a conquest. He was looking at her like a starving man who had finally found sustenance. He looked at her like a believer kneeling before a shrine. He spread her legs wider, settling himself firmly between them. The cool air of the room touched her inner thighs, but Min-ho's hands were there a second later, large and scorching hot, stroking the sensitive skin, pushing her open. "Look at me, Amara," he said, his voice rough. She forced her eyes open. She hadn't realized she'd closed them. "I want you to remember this," he said, holding her gaze, his thumbs brushing closer to her center. "I want you to remember that I am not the chairman's son right now. I am not a CEO. I am just a man who is completely, utterly at your mercy." And then, he lowered his head. The first touch of his tongue was electric. Amara screamed. It was a short, sharp sound that was torn from her throat before she could stop it. Her head fell back against the rug, her eyes rolling back. It was sensory overload. The scratch of his stubble against the tender skin of her inner thighs. The wet, hot pressure of his mouth. The relentless, rhythmic movement of his tongue. Min-ho was thorough. He was focused. He treated her body with a devastating combination of reverence and hunger. He didn't rush. He tasted her slowly, savoring her, his hands gripping her thighs to keep her still as she began to writhe. "Min-ho, please," she begged, her hips bucking involuntarily. The pleasure was building too fast, a tidal wave rising in the distance. "I can't, it's too much." He didn't stop. He simply hummed against her skin, a vibration that shot straight to her core. He adjusted his angle, his tongue finding the most sensitive point of her anatomy and circling it with maddening precision. "Don't hold back," he ordered, lifting his head for just a second to look at her. His mouth was slick, his lips swollen. "Let go, Amara. Let me catch you." He dove back in, the pace increasing. Amara was unraveling. The storm outside was forgotten. The cold was forgotten. There was only heat. There was only the fire in the hearth and the fire between her legs. She tangled her fingers in his hair, pulling, tugging, trying to bring him closer, trying to push him away, she didn't know. "Min-ho," she cried out, her voice breaking. He sucked harder, his rhythm matching the frantic beating of her heart. The climax hit her like a lightning strike. It shattered her. She cried out his name, her body bowing off the floor, every muscle seizing in a spasm of pure, white-hot ecstasy. She shook apart in his hands, wave after wave of pleasure crashing over her, drowning her. Minho stayed with her through every tremor. He kissed her through the aftershocks, soothing her, drinking her in until she finally collapsed back onto the rug, gasping, limp, and utterly ruined. If you're still breathing, barely, let me know in the comments. I think the temperature in the room just went up about 10 degrees. And if you want more stories that focus on this kind of deep, emotional intimacy, make sure you're subscribed. For a moment, there was only the sound of their ragged breathing and the pop of a log in the fireplace. Minho moved slowly. He crawled up her body, hovering over her again. He looked wrecked. His hair was a mess, his lips were red, and his eyes were blown wide with adrenaline. He brushed a damp curl of hair off her sweaty forehead. "You taste like home," he whispered. The admission was so raw, so honest, it made Amara's heart clench. She reached up, cupping his face. "You ruined me," she whispered back, a lazy smile touching her lips. "How am I supposed to go back to normal after that?" "We don't go back," he promised, leaning down to kiss her lips softly, tasting himself on her mouth. "We only go forward." But the hunger hadn't abated. If anything, her release had only sharpened his. Amara could feel the hard length of him pressing against her thigh through his boxer briefs. He was straining, trembling with the effort of holding back. He had given to her first, a selfless act of devotion, but now, he needed her. "Your turn," she whispered against his lips. Minho groaned, burying his face in her neck. "I don't know if I can be gentle, Amara. I feel like I'm losing my mind." "I don't want gentle," she said, her hands sliding down his back, tracing the dip of his spine, moving lower to grip the waistband of his boxers. "I want you. All of you. Now." She tugged on the fabric. Minho pulled back, sitting up on his knees. He shoved the boxers down his hips, kicking them free with a desperate urgency. He was magnificent. In the firelight, fully nude, he was powerful and imposing. The sight of his arousal, thick, heavy, and fully erect, made Amara's breath catch again. He was ready. More than ready. He moved between her legs again, but this time, the dynamic shifted. There was no more teasing. No more slow exploration. He braced himself on his hands, interlacing his fingers with hers on the rug, pinning her arms down gently but firmly. He looked down at her, his gaze locking onto hers. "Look at me," he commanded again. "I want to see your eyes when I enter you." Amara stared up at him, her chest heaving. She opened her legs wider, inviting him in, wrapping her ankles around his calves. He pushed forward. The entry was slow, agonizingly tight. Amara gasped, her head tipping back as he stretched her, filling the empty space inside her that had been aching for weeks. "God," Minho hissed through gritted teeth, pausing as he buried himself to the hilt. He closed his eyes, a vein throbbing in his temple. "You fit. You fit so perfectly." "Don't stop," Amara whined, lifting her hips, demanding movement. He opened his eyes. They were black pits of desire. "I couldn't stop if the world was ending," he vowed. And then, he began to move. It started slow, long, deep strokes that touched her soul. He withdrew almost completely before thrusting back in, creating a friction that made them both groan. The sound of skin slapping against skin joined the rhythm of the rain. "Minho," Amara breathed, the pleasure building again, different this time. Deeper. Heavier. "Minho, look at me." He looked down. Sweat was beading on his forehead, dripping onto her chest. "I love you," she blurted out. It was the first time she had said it since the breakup. "I love you so much." Minho froze for a fraction of a second, and then he shattered. "Sarangi," he shouted, the Korean word for "I love you," tearing from his throat as he abandoned all rhythm and just drove into her. "Sarangi, Amara. Only you." Always you. He picked up the pace, his hips snapping with a primal rhythm. Amara met him thrust for thrust, her nails digging into his shoulders, her legs locking around his waist to pull him deeper. They were a tangle of limbs and sweat and cries, moving together in the firelight, two halves of a whole finally, violently, reuniting. The storm raged outside, battering the glass, but inside, they were the hurricane. The silence that followed was heavy, but it wasn't empty. It was filled with the sound of their ragged breathing, sinking slowly in the dim light, and the crackle of the logs settling into embers in the hearth. Minho collapsed against her, his forehead resting in the crook of her neck. His weight was substantial, crushing in a way that felt like a shield. Amara lay beneath him, her limbs feeling like jelly, her heart still fluttering against her ribs like a trapped bird. She stared up at the ceiling, where shadows danced from the dying fire, feeling a profound sense of disorientation. The world outside, the typhoon, the washed-out roads, the board of directors in Seoul, felt like a distant memory from a past life. The only reality that mattered was the sweat slicking their skin where they touched, and the smell of sandalwood and musk that filled her nose. Minho shifted slightly, propping himself up on his forearms to avoid crushing her completely. He kissed the damp skin of her shoulder, a soft, lingering press of his lips that sent a fresh shiver down her spine. "Are you okay?" he whispered, his voice wrecked, rasping against her skin. Amara let out a shaky breath, threading her fingers through the damp hair at the nape of his neck. "I think I forgot my own name for a minute there." Minho chuckled, a low vibration against her chest. He lifted his head to look at her. His hair was a chaotic mess, sticking up in tufts, and his lips were swollen and red, bitten and kissed into submission. He looked thoroughly undone. It was a look no magazine cover or paparazzi shot had ever captured. It was hers alone. "Good," he murmured, a flash of possessiveness darkening his eyes. "I don't want you thinking about names. Or deadlines. Or anything but this." He leaned down and kissed her again, slow, lazy, and tasting of salt and affection. It was a stark contrast to the frantic, devouring heat of minutes ago. This was the aftershocks. This was the caretaking. "You're cold," he noted, his hand sliding down her flank. The fire was dying down, and the draft from the storm was creeping back across the floorboards. The sweat on their bodies was starting to cool, turning clammy. "I'm fine," Amara lied, though a goosebump rose on her arm to betray her. "Liar," he said softly. He pushed himself up, sitting back on his heels. He looked down at her, sprawled on the rug, her limbs tangled in the discarded blanket, her chest rising and falling. He reached out, his hand spanning her waist, his thumb brushing over the stretch marks on her hip with reverence. "I need to get you into a bed. A real bed." "I don't think my legs work, Minho," she admitted with a breathless laugh. "That's fine," he said, standing up. He stood tall in the firelight, unashamed of his nakedness, looking like a deity of old. He bent down and scooped her up into his arms as easily as if she were made of air. Amara squeaked, wrapping her arms around his neck, burying her face in his shoulder. "I can walk," she protested weakly. "You can," he agreed, walking toward the darkened hallway that led to the bedroom. "But tonight, you don't have to. There is something so incredibly intimate about the carrying trope, isn't there? It's not just about strength, it's about support. If acts of service or physical touch are your love language, let me know in the comments below. And hey, if you want to support this channel, a super thanks goes a long way to keeping the lights on in my cabin." The bedroom was freezing. The large window faced the brunt of the storm, and the glass was vibrating with the force of the wind. The air was crisp, biting. Minho didn't hesitate. He carried her to the large king-sized bed, pulling back the thick down duvet with one hand before gently depositing her onto the crisp, cold sheets. Amara shivered instantly as her bare skin hit the cotton. "Freezing." "Hold on," Minho said. He didn't move away. Instead, he climbed in beside her immediately, pulling the heavy duvet up over both of them, cocooning them in darkness and warmth. He pulled her into him, turning her so her back was pressed against his chest, spooning her tightly. He wrapped his arm around her waist, pulling her flush against him, intertwining their legs. His body heat was a furnace. Within seconds, the cold sheets began to warm. "Better," he whispered, his mouth right against her ear. "Much," she sighed, relaxing into him. She felt safe. For the first time in months, the low-level anxiety that buzzed in the back of her brain went silent. They lay there for a long time, just listening to the rain and the beat of each other's hearts. Minho's hand wasn't idle, it moved slowly up and down her arm, tracing patterns on her skin, keeping the connection alive. "Amara," he said eventually, his voice serious in the dark. I meant what I said. About the future." Amara stiffened slightly. This was the talk she had been dreading. The reality check. "Minho," she began, turning in his arms so she could face him. In the gloom, she could just make out the outline of his features. "We can't just pretend Seoul doesn't exist. You have a legacy. You have expectations. I can't be the secret you keep in a penthouse. And I can't be the trophy wife who smiles at galas and stops painting because it's messy. "I know," he said, his hand coming up to cup her face. His thumb stroked her cheekbone. "I don't want a trophy. I have enough trophies in my office. They are cold and sharp and they don't kiss me back." He took a deep breath, and she felt his chest expand against hers. "I have been restructuring," he admitted quietly. "For the last 3 weeks. Since you left." Amara blinked. "What?" "I told my father I'm stepping down from the daily operations of the shipping division. I'm keeping the tech arm, the part 1 actually built. The part 1 love. But the rest? The ceremonial dinners. The political marriages. I told him I'm out." "Minho," Amara gasped. That's half your inheritance." He must have been furious. He was apocalyptic, Minho said, a wry smile evident in his voice. He threw a vase. A Ming vase. It was very dramatic. He shifted closer, pressing his forehead against hers. "But I realized something, Amara. I was holding on to all of that because I thought it was what made me Minho. I thought without the title, I was nothing. But then you left. And I realized that with all the titles in the world, if I didn't have you, I was still nothing." Tears pricked Amara's eyes again. She reached out, tracing his lips with her fingers. "You're not nothing," she whispered fiercely. "You're the man who drove through a typhoon to bring me a towel." He kissed her fingers. "I'm the man who loves you. That's the only title I want." He moved his hand down, resting it flat on her stomach, skin on skin. "Come back to Seoul," he asked, his voice vulnerable. "Not to my penthouse. We'll get a new place. Something with a studio. North-facing light. Paint on the floors. I don't care. Just, come back to me." Amara closed her eyes, imagining it. A life where she didn't have to shrink to fit into his world. A life where he made space for hers. "What about the board?" she asked, the last hurdle. "The rumors? The chairman's son and the foreigner artist?" Minho snorted, a dismissive, arrogant sound that was purely him. "Let them talk," he growled. "I'll buy the newspapers if I have to. I don't care who stares, Amara. As long as the only person looking at me at the end of the day is you." The conviction in his voice swept away the last of her doubts. It wasn't that the problems were gone, it was that she finally believed they would face them as a team. "Okay," she whispered. "Okay," he repeated, sounding hopeful. "Okay," she smiled in the dark. "I'll come back. But I have conditions." "Name them." "Anything." "1," she listed, ticking it off on his chest. No more dinners with people who think freelance means unemployed. Done, he agreed instantly. 2. You stop working at 7 p.m. No phones at the dinner table. Acceptable. I prefer looking at you anyway. And 3, she said, her voice dropping, becoming husky again. She moved her leg, sliding her thigh up along his hip, reminding him of their nakedness. You never, ever stop touching me like you did tonight. Minho's breath hitched. His grip on her waist tightened, his fingers digging into her flesh possessively. That, he rumbled, shifting his hips so she could feel the hard ridge of him stirring against her stomach again, will be the easiest promise I ever keep. The atmosphere in the bed shifted instantly. The tender conversation was over, the heat was returning. You're awake again, Amara teased, feeling him harden against her. I told you, he murmured, leaning in to bite gently at her lower lip. I'm starving. One meal isn't enough. He rolled her onto her back. The duvet created a tent of warmth around them, a private universe. He settled between her thighs again, familiar and heavy. Minho, she sighed, her hands reaching up to pull him down. We should sleep. The storm. The storm can wait, he said, kissing his way down her neck, finding that spot behind her ear that made her toes curl. We have lost 21 nights, Amara. I intend to make up for every single one of them before the sun comes up. Amara laughed, a breathless, happy sound, before his mouth captured hers, silencing her with a kiss that promised endurance, devotion, and a very, very long night. Morning didn't break gently, it burst through the windows with the brilliance of a revelation. Amara woke slowly, pulled from the depths of a coma-like sleep by the sensation of heat hitting her face. She blinked, shielding her eyes against the glare. The storm had vanished as if it had never existed. The sky outside the massive glass wall was a piercing, impossible blue, and the mountains, washed clean by the typhoon, were a vibrant, breathing green. She stretched, her limbs heavy and languid. Every muscle in her body hummed with a dull, satisfied ache, the physical evidence of a night that had blurred the lines between endurance and ecstasy. She reached out instinctively to the other side of the bed. The sheets were cold. Panic, sharp and irrational, spiked in her chest. She sat up abruptly, clutching the duvet to her chest, her heart doing a frantic double beat. Had it been a dream? Had she conjured him out of loneliness and thunder? Then, she heard it. The low, rhythmic hum of a melody being whistled off-key, coming from the direction of the en-suite bathroom. And beneath that, the steady hiss of a shower running. Amara let out a breath that rattled in her chest, falling back against the pillows for a second to steady herself. He was real. He was here. And apparently, he was a morning person. She threw the covers off. She was naked, her skin marked with the faint, reddish ghosts of his stubble on her neck and the darker bruise of a possessive grip on her hip. She smiled, tracing the mark. It was a brand. Mine. She looked around for something to wear. Her clothes were still scattered in the living room, casualties of the night's urgency. She spotted Minho's white dress shirt, the one she had peeled off him by the fire, draped over the back of a chair. It was dry now, though wrinkled to hell. She slipped it on. It was massive on her, the sleeves hanging past her fingertips, the hem hitting her mid-thigh. It smelled like him, cedar, rain, and the faint metallic tang of the fire. She walked toward the bathroom. The door was cracked open, releasing billows of steam into the cool bedroom air. Through the frosted glass of the shower stall, she could see his silhouette. He was leaning against the tile, head back under the spray. He looked like a titan resting after a war. Amara didn't announce herself. She stepped into the steamy room, the humidity immediately frizzing the edges of her hair. She walked to the glass door and slid it open. Minho didn't jump. He opened his eyes slowly, as if he had sensed her presence the moment she crossed the threshold. Water cascaded down his face, over the sharp planes of his chest, channeling down the cut of his abs. He looked her up and down, taking in his shirt on her body. A slow, lazy smile spread across his face, a look of pure, unadulterated satisfaction. "You wear it better than I do," he rumbled, his voice rough with morning huskiness. "I woke up and you were gone," Amara said, stepping out of the shirt and letting it drop to the tiled floor in a puddle of white cotton. "I wanted to let you sleep." "You had a workout," he teased, his eyes darkening as he watched her step into the spray with him. "We both did," she countered, stepping into his space. The shower was large, a rainfall head mimicking the storm from the night before, but this rain was hot. Steaming hot. Minho reached out, pulling her under the spray. The water hit her skin, hot and soothing, washing away the lingering stiffness. But it was Minho's hands that did the real work. He grabbed a bottle of body wash, something expensive and herbal he must have brought in his travel kit, and lathered it between his palms. "Turn around," he murmured. Amara turned, presenting her back to him. He began to wash her. It wasn't sexual, not overtly. It was tender. His large, soapy hands moved over her shoulders, kneading out the knots. He slid down her spine, tracing the dip of her lower back, his thumbs pressing into the dimples there. "I could get used to this," Amara sighed, tipping her head forward, letting the water run down her neck. "Get used to it," Minho promised, pressing a kiss to her wet shoulder blade. "This is the new morning routine. Coffee. Shower. You." He turned her around to face him. The soap made their skin slick, creating a delicious friction as he pulled her flush against him. "Minho," she whispered, looking up at him through wet lashes. "We have to check out by 11. "We have time," he said, lifting her effortlessly. Amara wrapped her legs around his waist, her back pressing against the cool wet tiles, while the hot water drenched them. "We definitely have time," he growled, before capturing her mouth in a kiss that tasted of water and mint and forever. An hour later, the cabin was filled with the smell of roasting coffee beans. Amara sat on the kitchen counter, wearing the wrinkled white shirt again, swinging her legs. She was drinking from a mug Minho had just handed her. He was standing by the stove, dressed in his dry suit trousers and a black turtleneck he had seemingly pulled from a magic overnight bag. He looked unfairly put together, while Amara felt like she was held together by caffeine and pheromones. He was making eggs. Or attempting to. "You know," Amara noted, watching him struggle with the spatula. "For a man who runs a billion-dollar conglomerate, you are terrible at scrambling eggs." "I am a strategist, Amara, not a chef," he defended, scraping a stuck bit of egg off the pan. "Usually, I have people for this." "Well, you fired the people," she reminded him, hopping off the counter. "Move over. Let the professional handle it." She nudged him aside with her hip. Minho relinquished the spatula immediately, wrapping his arms around her waist from behind, resting his chin on her shoulder to watch her work. "I didn't fire everyone," he murmured into her hair. "Just the ones who made my life miserable." A quiet buzz vibrated on the marble countertop. They both froze. It was Minho's phone. It had been dead since he arrived, but he must have plugged it in while she was sleeping. The screen lit up. 15 missed calls, Chairman Father. 42 emails, Board Secretary. The reality of the world was trying to break in. The storm was over, and the cleanup was waiting. Amara felt Minho stiffen against her back. She stopped stirring the eggs, her heart sinking slightly. This was the test. Minho reached out. His hand hovered over the phone. Amara held her breath. Was he going to answer? Was he going to slip back into Director Choi mode? Minho picked up the phone. He looked at the screen for a long second, his face unreadable. Then, he held down the power button. "Minho?" Amara asked softly. "He can wait," Minho said, tossing the power-down phone onto the sofa across the room. It landed on a cushion with a soft thud. "We're eating breakfast." And then we're driving back. The scenic route. He turned her around in his arms, ignoring the burning eggs. I told you, Amara. I'm done being driven by that thing, he nodded at the phone. I'm driving now. And I know exactly where I'm going. Amara smiled, a radiant, blinding thing that rivaled the sun outside. She reached up, smoothing the high collar of his turtleneck. And where is that? Home, he said, leaning down to brush his nose against hers. With you. They say a storm destroys everything in its path. But sometimes, if you're lucky, a storm just clears the view. It washes away the pretenses, the obligations, and the fear, leaving only what is solid. What is real? As Minho's black sedan wound its way down the mountain road an hour later, the sun glinting off the wet asphalt, Amara looked out the window. She watched the cabin disappear into the trees, a little glass box where they had broken apart and put each other back together. She reached across the center console. Minho didn't look away from the road, but his hand left the gear shift immediately to find hers. He interlaced their fingers, bringing her hand to his lips for a brief, firm kiss, before resting their joined hands on his thigh. He didn't let go. Not for the entire 4-hour drive south. The storm was behind them. The horizon was clear. And for the first time in her life, Amara wasn't running away from anything. She was running toward everything. And, exhale. That is the end of Amara and Minho's story, for now. If you enjoyed this journey, if you felt that chemistry, please do me a huge favor, like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on that bell. It tells the algorithm that you want more AMBW romances, more deep emotional connections, and definitely more storms. I have a new story coming next week that involves a rival CEO and a very, very small elevator. You won't want to miss it. Until then, keep loving loudly. Bye.